Drew Newman, and in 1895, my great-grandfather, Julius C. Newman, founded our family cigar company. And 4 generations and 125 years later, we're very proud to be the oldest family-owned cigar company, and we're very proud to operate the last working cigar company, the cigar factory here in the cigar city of Tampa. This morning, I'm here to talk about the past, the present, and the future of Tampa's historic cigar industry. And I'm joined by my father, Eric Newman, Kara Guagliardo, our Director of Marketing and Community Engagement, and thank you so much for having us. Before I talk about Tampa's cigar industry, let me just spend a moment on my family. So my great-grandfather, Julius C. Newman, was born in Austria-Hungary in 1875, and he came to America as a refugee in 1889 with his family. They settled with relatives in Cleveland, and they had very little. My great-grandfather didn't speak English and didn't have a formal education, but he knew he wanted to pursue the American dream. And for reasons we don't know, he decided he wanted to become a cigar maker. So my family cobbled together $20 to pay a existing cigar maker for him to be an apprentice for 4 months. And my great-grandfather learned the trade from the grands and roll a cigar and build a life for himself. He became a good cigar maker and had jobs in Cleveland and New York. But in a Great Recession in 1895, he was laid off. He didn't have an income, he lost his job, but he still had his hands, he still had his skill, he still knew how to roll a cigar. And so my great-grandmother went to the grocery store where she shopped every week and bought groceries and got an order for her son for 500 cigars. And with those first 500 cigars, my great-grandfather founded our company, and here we are today, 4 generations and 125 years later. My great-grandfather, JC Newman, passed our family business down to my grandfather, Stanford. Stanford passed it down to my father, Eric, and my uncle, Bobby, who are in the process of passing it down to my cousins and me. But as my father liked to say, he's not letting go anytime soon. He's passing the baton, but he's still holding on, which I'm very grateful for. My great-grandfather built our company to be the largest cigar factory in Cleveland, then the largest in the Midwest. But he quickly realized in the early 20th century that to be successful, he needed to move to the cigar city, to Tampa. So in 1953, he sent my grandfather down to Tampa, and my great-grandfather bought the Clock Tower Cigar Factory, bought El Reloj just north of I-4, and we moved our operations there to 1954. In 1954, and we still roll cigars there today, just like my grandfather and great-grandfather did 100 years ago. The 1880 census says there were 700 people here in the Tampa Bay area back then. There was Fort Brooke, there was some agriculture, and there was little else. In 1880, the center of the American cigar industry was Key West, just 90 miles north of Cuba, where some Cuban refugees had settled in the 1860s. But Key West proved to be a difficult place to roll cigars. You have storms that roll through there. You have the logistical problems about being stuck on an island. And then also there was labor unrest. So in 1885, Vicente Martinez Ybor and Ignacio Hayab traveled up and around the Gulf Coast looking for a new place, a new home to roll cigars. They went from Florida to Mobile to Galveston, and after a long search, they realized that Tampa is a perfect place to make cigars. Tampa was perfect because of its climate. Our wonderful humidity is perfect for cigars. Because of its port, the Deepwater port is perfect for ships coming in with tobacco and leaving with cigars. And then also because of the brand new, at the time, railroad by Henry B. Plant provided great logistical connection to move cigars to the cities in the Northeast. So on April 13th, 1886, the first cigar was rolled here in Tampa. which is actually means that we're 6 weeks away from the 135th anniversary of that. And Dad and Kara, we need to think of a way to celebrate that anniversary next month. But Tampa's population grew almost instantaneously once the cigar industry came here. Many others followed Ybor and Haya, and the population grew to 16,000 people by 1900 and 100,000 people by 1930. So that's 700 people in 1880 to 100,000 people 50 years later in 1930, all because of the cigar industry. And it's hard to overstate the importance of the cigar industry to Tampa 100 years ago. If you've been in Tampa for a few generations, chances are your relatives rolled cigars, or they performed some other job in a cigar factory, or they made cigar boxes, or printed cigar labels, or fed the cigar workers. This really was a cigar town. It was Cigar City, and Tampa became world famous because of the cigar industry. At its peak, 100 years ago, there were 150 large cigar factories just like ours that rolled 500 million cigars by hand each year. To put that number in perspective, right now there are about 350 million premium cigars sold in the United States each year, and 99% of those are imported from other countries around the world. So 350 million are consumed and sold today throughout the United States, and 100 years ago, 500 million were made here in Ybor City and West Tampa. It truly was just a remarkable industry. But it peaked about 100 years ago, and beginning with World War II, the industry started a sharp decline. Men before the war smoked cigars, and after the war they came back smoking cigarettes. And the industry began to suffer. And over the years, factory after factory started closing, production started moving overseas, and we were left with a lot of shells of buildings and a lot of history, but not too many cigars. So as far as the president of the cigar industry right now, our factory just north of I-4 on 16th Street in Ybor City is the last operating cigar factory here in Tampa. Every day we roll about 60,000 cigars, one of two ways, using hand-operated antique cigar machines that my great-grandfather bought 100 years ago. And we also started rolling cigars entirely by hand as well to try to continue Tampa's cigar-making legacy. Additionally, there are a number of small sort of storefront cigar rollers on 7th Avenue and a few other places in Tampa that are rolling cigars by hand for visitors, and they're wonderful. We're doing everything we can to keep them going. There's some great cigar shops here. There's some headquarters of international cigar companies that make cigars overseas. Their headquarters are still here. And there's also the history of Tampa being Cigar City. But it's very different today than it was 100 years ago. One thing I'll say has been very helpful is that Cigar City Brewing, their rise in popularity has just done wonders for Tampa's name recognition as a cigar capital and telling the story of Tampa's cigar heritage. So turning towards the future for a moment, in our instructions for this morning, Bill said, share big ideas, and this group likes to think big and be thought-provoking. So as I talk about the future of the cigar industry just for a moment, I'll be very direct and share our goals, our challenges, and our hopeful solutions. So our one goal as a company is simply to continue our family cigar heritage and legacy for another 4 generations and another 125 years. And also to keep Tampa's cigar making tradition alive. We think that's important for our community and our cultural fabric here in Tampa, and we want to continue that legacy. The problem is, for us, how do we survive and compete and continue to roll cigars here on a basis that can be cost competitive with cigars imported from overseas? The reason why so many factories closed here in Tampa decades ago and moved to the Caribbean and Central America is primarily because of lower wages overseas and the fact that we're making a handcrafted product that is very labor intensive. Additionally, most people in the United States don't know of Tampa cigar heritage. We all know it because we live here, but if you go to Milwaukee or Denver or out west and you ask anyone about cigars, chances are they're going to say Cuba, and if they reference the United States, they're going to say Miami. Tampa cigar heritage has somewhat been lost outside of our community, so we want to tell the story better. So as far as our solutions, what we're trying to do to keep Tampa cigar making heritage alive and keep our factory going in Tampa is three things. One, continue rolling the cigars that we've always been rolling in Tampa because we still have a market for them and we can still sell them and have a great staff that are making them. Two, a few years ago we started rolling a special cigar called the American, which is more expensive in large part because it's the first 100% all-American cigar. Every piece of that product, from all the tobaccos to the wood, the boxes, to the ink and the paper and the cigar bands, is all made entirely here in the United States. It's a great story that celebrates America's centuries-old tradition of cigar making. And then our third solution that we are working on and Kara has been leading for us is opening our factory to the public. Many of you may have visited wineries in California or elsewhere, or breweries, or the Bourbon Trail, and so many other types of related industries have turned their factories and facilities into tourist destinations. Tampa has such a rich history of cigar making that we think we have the perfect destination with our 110-year-old cigar factory to make it into the premier cigar tourist destination. And so in front of you is a postcard on the back. It shows photos of our brand new cigar museum that we just opened a couple months ago. It's a 3-level cigar museum telling the history of Tampa cigar heritage and how we roll cigars today, just like we did 100 years ago. We have an event space, we have a theater showing old cigar films, we've got a new handmade cigar rolling room in the factory, a factory store. We want to be a destination for cigar enthusiasts to come here to Tampa. And so I was told to be brief. I was told not to talk very long because this group likes to be engaged and ask questions. So I'd love to invite my dad over here to say, did I miss anything, Dad? He's my boss, too.
I'm glad I speak. I'm glad I don't speak acting.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dad. Thank you. Thank you, Dad. It's a real privilege to be in a family business for lots of reasons. But with that, I think we would love to open up for questions and happy to tell you more about what we do and love to hear your thoughts.